Tyre pressures, something many of us should probably check more often than we actually do, not only for a safety concern, but also for an economy one. Apparently, the lower the tyre pressures, the more fuel you use, and the higher the tyre pressures, the less fuel you use. Today, I'm going to put that to the test and find out if it's actually true. I'm going to use this car and this road for the test. This car is a 2014 Seat Leon turbo petrol. It's a 1.4 four-cylinder engine, and apparently it has 140 PS of power and 250 Newton meters of torque. I've owned it since new. It's got over 190,000 miles on the clock now, but it does run very well. 29 psi at the front and 26 psi at the back are the pressures I'm supposed to run according to the owner's manual. I'm going to do the test at those pressures at 20 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour and 60 miles an hour 3 times and work out the mean average so that I have my base economy. Then I'm going to drop all the pressures by 5 psi and see what the economy is at those speeds, and then by 10 psi and see what the economies are. I'll also do it at 5 psi higher than the manufacturer's recommended pressures to see if that saves fuel. It's going to be a fair test because I'm running it over the exact same stretch of road each time, and I'll use cruise control at a set constant speed from point to point, so there's no variance in my driving. The only variation is going to be the pressures in the tyres. I'm going to set the tyre pressures before each test. I understand the tyre pressures in the owner's manual should be set with cold tyres, and this car's no longer cold. I drove it quite far to get here, so it's fully up to temperature. But I want the pressures in the tyres to be the pressures I say they are. So I'll set them now and before each test, so that when I say it's 5 psi lower, it genuinely is 5 psi lower. There's no variance there. So I have a busy day today of setting tyre pressures, pumping them up and letting air out. I have a mechanical air pump and an electronic one if I get tired. Luckily on this occasion, I actually need to let some air out. That's the easy bit. I'm going to put this frisbee at the side of the road to mark out the start position of the test, and I already have a handy finish line, which is a road on the left. When I get to that road, that's when I'll finish recording the economy. And if you're interested in the tyre pressure gauge I'm using, it's this one here. Really quite fond of it. I'll leave a link to it in the description. Had it a long time, it's accurate and just feels nice in the hand to use. So this is the first test. It's 20 miles per hour. Using the cruise control, 3rd gear, because that's the best gear for 20, and with the standard pressures. So up to 3rd, cruise control set at 20. There's the frisbee now resetting, fuel economy. Let's see what it gets. It's not a perfectly flat road, but it's close to that. It's as flat as I can find it. It's ever so slightly downhill, but then it goes a little bit uphill nearer the end of the route, but it's going to be the same piece of road for each test, so it should be fair. There's lots of variables, but the variables shouldn't be changing, and the fact that I'm doing it with cruise control means my foot isn't changing on the gas. The trip computer for the fuel economy is actually very accurate. I've filled up this car over 600 times, and well, usually it underreads by 0 to 3 mpg because I check it every time I fill it up. I know I probably shouldn't spend my life doing that, but I do. And let's say it says I've got 50 to the gallon. I've either got 51, 52, 53. That's since it's had about 100,000 miles on the clock. Before then, it used to overread slightly, which is interesting. I don't know why, but well, this run is quite boring. 20 miles an hour is taking a very long time. And I've got to do this 3 times, then 3 times at 40 and 3 times at 60. Coming up to the finish line now, which is this road on the left, paying attention to the economy. Now, 62.5. I'll make a note of that and I'll do the other runs and I'll let you know the results. So I've done 3 tests at 20, 3 at 40 and 2 at 60 with the standard tyre pressures. This is my last one at 60. I thought I would show you it. It's not the easiest one to do because I've got to get 60 miles an hour before the frisbee, cruise control and top gear. So I go as quick as I can around this bend but safe. There you go, now I can go full throttle, launch up to 60, straight into 6th, cruise control on, reset. Good, made it just in time there. Let's see what the economy is like. 40 miles an hour is actually the most economical. 20 was slightly less economical, and of course 60 hasn't been as economical. We're getting in the 40s, I think. Been writing it down, already forgotten in my head, but I've written it down. I'll work out the mean average. Coming up to the finish line now, and there, 47.2. Okay, I'm going to collate the results, work out the averages, and let you know. Here are the results of the runs with the correct tyre pressures as per the owner's manual. 3 runs at each speed, and I've worked out the mean average. 20 miles per hour, it was 66.9 miles per gallon. 40 miles per hour, 75.6 miles per gallon. And at 60 miles per hour, 47.7 miles per gallon. So that's the base. Let's see how letting some air out the wheels affects that. I'm going to let 5 psi out of each. So at the moment it's 29 at the front, so that will then become 24. Yeah, I had to do some maths there. And it's 26 at the back, so that will become 21. And then I'll do exactly the same test and see how that compares. Although there's clouds up there, and if it rains, I'm going to have to cancel the test. So I need to get this done quickly, because if there's water on the road, I'm scuppered. The results will be meaningless. So 20 miles per hour now, 5 psi less in each wheel, 66.9 I think was the average, the mean average over the runs with the correct pressures. Cruise control at 20, there's the red frisbee resetting now. It'll be interesting to see the result. I don't expect it will be too much different, because 5 psi, well, it's quite a lot. I noticed the tyre go down as I took the pressure out, because although it's only 5 out of 29, because I'm starting at 29 at the front, taking 5 away, that's quite a lot really. I can see the tyres get a little bit flatter, but I think it's fairly typical for people to have tyres that are 5 psi out, below or above, because seasonal differences make a difference. When I'm going into winter, I have to keep adding air to get the right pressure, because as the temperature goes down, the pressures drop. And when I'm going into summer, I have to keep letting air out to keep the correct pressure. So I'm not sure if it make a big difference, but we will see. Only 20 miles an hour. I think it'll probably make more of a distance when I'm doing the higher speeds. At the moment, it's actually better. Look at that. But I'm not at the end yet. It goes a bit more uphill at the end. The mean average was 66.9 for the standard correct pressures. Near the finish line now, 73. That's actually pretty good. 72.8, and there, 72.8 for 20 miles per hour with 5 psi lower. I'm going to do that run 2 more times and get the mean average. Here are the results for 5 psi lower in each wheel. Not as I expected, and I think the first one is a bit of an anomaly, because 20 miles per hour with 5 psi less in each wheel, I got 69.3 miles per gallon. So my economy actually went up by 2.4 miles per gallon on average. And I can't think why, because I've done everything exactly the same. Even the weather is the same. It's overcast instead of sunny, but the temperature is almost the same, within a degree. The only thing I can think of is maybe the engine was slightly colder on the first run. Now, I did drive here to get it up to temperature, and after setting up the cameras, I drove again to make sure it was fully up to temperature, but maybe driving a bit longer, it just gets that bit hotter, which makes it a bit better, even though the dials are telling me it's up to temperature. So yeah, I probably should ignore that one. But having said that, at 40 miles per hour, the economy was 72.9, which means I lost 2.7 miles per gallon. That's more like what I was probably thinking it would be, a little bit less. And at 60 miles per hour, I got 47.3 miles per gallon. So I only lost 0.4 miles per gallon at 60. So it seems like that the biggest variable here aren't the tyres, because I've reduced the tyre pressures And at 40 miles an hour, I'm losing 2.7 mpg, but at 60, where I'd think it'd be even worse, I'm only losing 0.4. There's another variable I don't know about going on somewhere. What's interesting about the 60 mile per hour run is how identical it was to the run I did with normal tyre pressures. Two of the runs were exactly the same. I got 48.3 twice and 47.2 twice as well, with different tyre pressures. So I don't think tyre pressures make a huge difference to your economy, especially only 5 psi. I'm going to let another 5 psi out, so that'll be a total of 10, and see what happens. So now for the 20 mile per hour test with the tyres at 10 psi lower. Cruise control set. Where's the frisbee? Ready to reset the trip computer. Resetting now. There we go. So 10 psi lower. That means I've got 19 at the front and 16 at the back. I don't want to go lower than that because I don't want to drive this car at 60 miles per hour with pressures lower than that. Even those pressures make me feel a little bit uncomfortable. Now, the slightly sporadic results of the last test doesn't really surprise me too much, because I remember before I was a driving instructor, so this is before 2009, at my old job, once a week I'd go to Tesco at lunch and buy the Auto Express weekly car magazine. And I remember a test they did. They tested the fuel economy of a car with a roof rack, without a roof rack, how many people in the car, different numbers of people, and different different tyre pressures. And they didn't change the fuel pressures. I don't think they could do that. So different tyre pressures, and from memory, this surprised me, this is why I remember it, it didn't make much of a difference. And that surprised me because I remember riding bicycles, I still do, and if you pump the tyres up, it's so much easier to ride. But in a car, I guess there's so many different factors and variables and other forces to overcome that a slight difference in tyre pressure doesn't make much difference. But I think this one at 10 psi less, will make a difference, and that is 68.1 mpg. I'm going to do that 2 more times at this speed, then I'll do it at 40 and 60, and I'll let you know the results. I've done quite a lot of runs now. I've been doing it most of the day, and it became quite clear to me that my first run didn't make sense. 20 miles an hour, normal tyre pressures. I got better economy when I took 5 psi out of each tyre. So I'm thinking, what's wrong with that first run? I did it again. I did the whole thing again, and I got the same results. This car at 20 miles per hour consistently gives me better fuel economy when I take 5 psi out of each wheel. Why? I don't know. I'll tell you what I've got. So 20 miles per hour, taking away 5 psi, I got an improvement of 2.4 mpg. I did the whole thing again later on in the day, and I still got an improvement of 0.9 mpg. Not as much of an improvement, but still an improvement. I took away 10 psi on the other tests, and I got a loss of 0.2. Not much, almost the same. And again, on another set of tests at 20 miles an hour, taking away 10 psi got me a loss of 1.7. That's probably more like what I was expecting. But gaining fuel economy when I reduced the tyre pressure by 5 psi, gaining it consistently, test after test, was not what I expected. So I think maybe we should ignore the 20 mile per hour results of this video. They don't seem to make much sense. And the fuel economy my computer records at 20 miles an hour is more sporadic. It can be within like 10 miles per gallon from run to run. Whereas at 40 and 60, it's much more consistent. I'm getting usually point something mile per gallon difference, or 1 mile per gallon difference. So much more consistent at 40 and 60. Let's look at those results. So 40 miles per hour, taking away 5 psi, lost me 2.7 mpg. Taking away 10 psi, lost me a bit more, 3.5 mpg. 60 miles an hour, taking away 5 psi, lost me only 0.4 mpg. I thought higher speeds, tyre pressures would have a greater effect, but not on this occasion. And I took away 10 psi at 60 miles an hour, and that lost me 1.4 mpg. Very consistent there, that at higher speeds, it doesn't seem to be as sensitive to tyre pressures than it is at lower speeds at 40 miles an hour. That's not what I expected. I thought at higher speeds, reducing tyre pressure would make a bigger effect. But that's not the case in this test. I've added 5 psi now. I'm still going to do the 20 mile per hour run just for fun, but I'll do the 40 mile per hour and 60 mile per hour run as well because they seem to be more accurate. Anyway, 20 miles per hour this one. Cruise control set. Where's the frisbee? There it is. Reset now. Let's see how much worse this is. Of course, it's 20 miles per hour, so it's not going to give me a consistent result at all. It's going to give me like 12 mpg. Who knows? But I'm sure at 40 miles per hour and 60 miles per hour, my mpg is going to be slightly better. I say sure, actually, I take that back. 5 psi? That's not a huge amount of extra pressure. Will I notice, or will the car notice? Will I get better mpg? Only time will tell. I don't advise, and I must stress this, I do not advise running incorrect pressures, even if you get better economy. It's better to run the pressure that the manufacturer recommends for safety and for the longevity of your tyres. You may be saving a little bit in fuel by overinflating them, but then the middle of the tyre is going to wear more quickly. I actually run my pressures 2 psi at the front lower than recommended, but there's a reason behind that, and I'll explain that soon. Even I've just said use the manufacturer's advice, because how long I've had the car, I actually know otherwise. Anyway, coming up to the finish line now, 65.1. That, I don't know if that's better. I think that is actually worse. I'm going to do that run 2 more times, take the average, and I'll do the other speeds, and yeah, I'll get back to you. I have actually made some other videos about fuel economy. One video was comparing this car at 30 miles per hour in all of the gears, because it can do 30 miles per hour in first gear right the way through to 6th gear. If you're interested in which gear was the most economical at 30, I'll leave a link to that video in the top right hand corner of your screen. I've finished the plus 5 psi runs, and I want to make a quick note about how this car rides at different tyre pressures. When the pressures are higher, it's more harsh. It almost feels like the car is rattling. When I lower the pressures, the ride doesn't get any more softer than normal, but the steering's heavier, to the point where when I get in the car and turn the wheel, I think there's something wrong with the steering, until I remember that I've lowered the pressures, which means more resistance and therefore heavier steering. The reason why I'm making this note is because the differences were far greater than I expected. I thought they would be subtle, but a small difference in pressure, 5 psi, makes a big difference to how the car feels. Anyway, on to the results of the plus 5 psi runs. At 20 miles an hour, my economy improved by 3.3 mpg over 20 miles per hour with normal pressures. Now, if you remember, I did many tests at 20 miles per hour with normal pressures, and one group of tests I improved my economy by 3.3 miles per gallon by adding the extra pressure, and comparing it to another group of tests, I increased my economy by 1.8 miles per gallon. So regardless of which test I compare it to, adding 5 psi has improved my economy. It's quite clear. At 40 miles per hour, I've improved my mpg by 1.8, and at 60 miles per hour, I've improved my mpg by 3. So across the board there, adding pressure to the tyres above the manufacturer's recommendations is saving me a little bit of fuel. But a little bit of fuel. That moves me on to my next point. I'm dealing with tiny differences here. That makes it very hard to test. It's clear that changing the pressures of the tyres has a very small impact on economy. And in the real world, with other variables taking effect, it's hard to test and get consistent results. In a lab, yes, I may be able to get more consistent results. But here, they're a little bit sporadic. But it is clear, very clear, that across the board of my results, less tyre pressures, so lower tyre pressures, means I use more fuel, and higher tyre pressures means I use less fuel. However, they're tiny differences, and I recommend you follow your manufacturer's recommendations for your tyre pressures. And I know I said I put 2 psi less in my front tyres than recommended, and I said I would explain. So I'll do that now. It's because I got uneven tyre wear. The middle of the tyre was wearing more than the edges. Now that normally means your tyres are overinflated. If the edges wear quicker than the middle, that usually means your tyres are underinflated. If one side is wearing more quickly, then generally your alignment's out. You need to adjust something in the suspension. Although with some cars, it doesn't matter how you set them up, they wear their tyres unevenly. That's my experience anyway. So I did some research. I thought, why is this wearing more in the middle? And I found out that the 2-litre turbo diesel variant of this, which is 130 kilos heavier than this 1.4-litre turbo petrol, has the same recommended tyre pressures, which I think probably isn't right. That's a big difference in weight. So I thought I would do an experiment just to see. I lowered the fronts by 2 psi, from 29 psi to 27, and I waited months, quite a few months, to be able to tell a difference. And I got even tyre wear, and I've had even tyre wear ever since. So although I recommend following the manufacturer's instructions for your tyre pressures, obviously if you own your car so long, you might know it a little bit better. But at least with these pressures, I get full use out of each set of tyres, so it actually saves me money and I don't see a difference in fuel economy. I've made a bit of an error. During the edit of this video, I thought it would be a good idea to double check to make sure SEAT really do recommend the same tyre pressures for both the diesel and petrol variants of the car. And as it turns out, they recommend higher pressures for the diesel, so I was wrong. I'm not sure why I remember it being the same, but I've had the car coming up for 9 years now, and it's been many years since I dropped the front tyre pressures by 2 psi, so my memory is obviously wrong as to how I came to the conclusion of doing that. Probably just because the middle of the tyre was wearing, and usually slightly lower pressure solves the issue. So I'm sorry, SEAT. You do recommend different tyre pressures for different variants of the same model of car. I was wrong, but dropping mine by 2 psi actually seemed to have done the job, and now I get even tyre wear. And yes, I have done my wheel alignment on this car. It did seem to be the pressure that was causing the uneven wear. So the conclusion of this video is, yes, tyre pressures do make a difference to fuel economy. Higher pressures save you fuel, lower pressures use more fuel, but the difference is tiny, and I recommend you follow the manufacturer's recommendations and try and get as even tyre wear as you can so that you get full use out of your tyre. And if your tyre's wearing evenly, it's doing its job well. And you probably save more money saving your tyres than saving a tiny bit of fuel. If you think the video is interesting, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're looking for car insurance, check out the links to Collingwood and Confused in the description. If you're learning to drive and want to insure yourself on somebody else's car, then Collingwood are here for you, because you can do so without affecting the owner's policy. And at the moment, via the link, there's up to 35% off and a £20 Amazon gift card. If you want to insure your own car, I recommend checking out the link to confused.com. You fill out one quote form and get loads of quotes back from many insurers, so you can compare who's cheapest. And you can change your car on that quote as many times as you like to compare how much it costs to insure different cars, which is a really useful tool. Using the links doesn't cost you anything, but it does support the channel, so thank you very much. Subscribe to get my future videos, and until the next one, cheerio.